Hey, it's Viv here. We're super excited to share this episode with you. I just wanted to give you a heads up that we had some technical difficulties with our microphones deciding to start working during the recording. So we've done our best to clean up the backup audio, but you may notice some distortions here and there. However, please continue to tune in as the content still contains lots of laughter, life learnings, and unique stories you definitely won't want to miss. Enjoy the episode.
Give us your money.
We have been watching you on YouTube since we were kids. Yeah. We're super wild. We grew up with like community channels.
Sorry for corrupting you.
In this episode, we're joined by Neel Kolhatkar.
When I was a teenager, I was very interested in performing. I particularly had a knack for impressions and impersonations. I started making some of the sketches that I think a lot of people might know me for, the ones where they're very aggressive and there's a lot of yelling. I mean, I was 19, so...
Hey.
I always try to put out kind of nuanced, complex, precise comedy because I truly believe you can make fun of or make jokes about any culture, any group of people, or anything, assuming it's funny. I always try to test it like this. If the majority of that group likes the humor, then I've done my job.
Do you feel like having an ethnic background gave you that advantage to be able to make these racial jokes and criticisms?
I think it did, yeah. I'll just hope that people understand you need to allow comedians that license. You know, there's a difference between saying, hey, I don't think that was your best joke, compared to, oh, you're an irredeemably racist person that I'll unfollow now forever.
Where are the kangaroos, bro?
Before we get started on today's episode, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast is recorded, the land of the Darug people. We would like to acknowledge and pay respects to our elders past and present and the next generation coming through. Now, onto today's episode.
Thanks, Neel, for coming to...
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
Yeah, so, I've met you before, very briefly. I don't know if you remember, this is probably about maybe 5 years ago, on the set of a short film called Dirt Tin. And it was the whole thing was about the city lockout laws.
That was a good idea.
Yeah, so I was doing like art department there. So I made like shirts for you with like, and like, we made these shirts, political shirts, bit of satire. But then we had to put a blazer over you. Like, we should see the shirts anyway. So like the gag just wasn't there. So we just kind of like bodily out.
Well, you made those shirts and then they put a blazer over it.
What a blazer over it. Yeah. Hush. Name's Hush. It's rough. But
I'm sure I'd feel bad, but I don't remember fully. I remember Neel.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the shirts were amazing.
Yeah. Thoughts on the film though, speaking of like lockout laws, I know you've been, obviously in comedy for a long time. Mm-hmm. How was that whole period for you with the whole lifestyle comedy? Oh shit.
Man, this is going to sound really petty, but the funny thing is, all the people that could no longer go to clubs were looking for other places to go out, and a lot of them came to comedy. Oh, so comedy usually ends by, 10:30 later. Yeah. So it's not like a nightclub where you're out till 3, 4, 5 a.m. depending on how hard you go.
Yeah.
So we found that it didn't really affect comedy that much. If anything, it helped comedy nights. Actually, another good little period was when, after I think it might have been the second lockdown or maybe the first lockdown when they, you were allowed 50 people in a venue. Yeah. So you couldn't have big music events. You couldn't have big nightclubs. Again, people still wanted to go out. What's a perfect event with 50 people in it? A comedy night. Right. So, in a weird way, some of this stuff actually helps us. But overall, no, I think it's better that we allow all the events, including club events, to go ahead.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I guess as with all of our other podcasts with guests and everything, we like to wind it back for our audience who might not understand the context so much. Sure. So Neel, we have been watching you on YouTube since we were kids.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So we grew up with you. We grew up with super wild. We grew up with like community channel.
My channel.
Yes, 100%.
Sorry for corrupting you.
Great impact. So for those who might not know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll go into your upbringing and your childhood too?
Sure. So I'll just start with career stuff. When I was a teenager, I was very interested in performing, and I particularly had a knack for impressions and impersonations. I could do accents and characters really well. I loved Chris Lilly and Sacha Baron Cohen. They were my two favorites. And I started posting little sketches on YouTube way back in, I think this was 2007. And I was doing a lot of extracurricular drama stuff. And I think around about 13, 14, I said, I want to do this full time. I'd love to be either an actor or a comedian. And I just kept going with it. First year out of high school, I started making some of the sketches that I think a lot of people might know me for. The ones where they're very aggressive and there's a lot of yelling. I mean, I was 19, so it makes sense. And they went viral. And then I was lucky enough to sort of gain an audience for my live shows and started posting stand-up material. And yeah, since then I've been doing it full time. I've been a full-time comedian for 10 years now, which is awesome because not a lot of people get to do that in the arts industry. And I've made short films. I've, as you know, like I've been in a bit. There's a lot of
little bit like an
yes. And I've gone to different countries and performed stand up, and yeah, I've had a good 10 years.
Nice.
Yeah, amazing. Let's wind it back a little bit now, and maybe you can tell us about your upbringing and your childhood and what's your life.
So I grew up in the southeast of Sydney. A few people might know my Cogdog character. It's based on a suburb, Cobram, which I grew up in a suburb next to Cobra, but no one needs to know that. Cobra's the main one with the train station. I also grew up in Hurstville for a while, so St. George represent. And of Indian heritage. My parents came here at different times. So my mum actually was a child when she came in 1962. So her parents migrated here in the 60s. So long time ago. And then my dad came in the 80s to marry her and to get that visa. And for luck, and I had a pretty normal kind of childhood. From a pretty young age, I started doing performing arts, which was definitely a bit different for someone of my background, I guess. We'll probably go into that in the podcast. But I had a pretty normal childhood. I really liked cricket as a good little Indian boy, and I was studious. I was good at school, but then I did start to act out. I think in late primary school, not in a really bad way, but I was just a class clown. So I then have made a career out of doing that. But I was just a bit rude and always made inappropriate jokes. In primary school would have been noises probably. And so I got in trouble that way, but yeah, I never really did anything really bad or acted out in a really horrible way. And then I went to high school in the Shire in Sydney, which I don't know if anyone remembers. There was a reality TV show maybe a decade ago. They were trying to do a Geordie Shore version. So the Shire is basically the Gold Coast in Sydney. Yep. A lot of cashed up tradies with sleeve tats.
Jet skis.
Yeah, a lot of plastic surgery. Lovely people though, don't get me wrong. They like comedy, we'll say. And, primary school in St. George area, which was a lot more multiracial, and then the Shire, which I guess was definitely more Aussie. I think that gave me a pretty interesting perspective, and that helped me, can illustrate the characters the way I do.
Like, you get your characters so perfect, and you capture the audiences like so well. Were you always kind of like a bit of the outsider that was like observing and like being able to kind of translate that? Like how did you perfect the craft? I'd
say it was the outsider, not really because of I don't think it was because of ethnicity or anything. I think I was just quite shy. Mm-hmm. I was always a bit reclusive is a strong word, but introverted and observant, and in a weird way that was almost not power, but it was a way to gain a bit of attention, just kind of impersonating the kids at school or the teachers or even my parents, my sister, my family members. And if I were to, I guess, psychoanalyze it, I think that's where a lot of it came from, just a need for a bit of social attention.
I guess then taking us through high school and then university, or where did you take yourself after high school, I guess?
So after high school, I like I said, I'd say from about age 15, I thought I really want to do this full time and professionally. So I'll give it everything after high school. And I took a gap year after high school, and I was doing a few part-time jobs. Actually, I was teaching drama and improvisation then. And I started doing open mic comedy nights. So that's when you go to a bar where anyone can get up and perform. So you get some real horror stories there. But actually, if you want to see a comedy night in a very meta way, so if you want to actually laugh at people trying comedy, go do an open mic comedy night. Oh, you get some really funny acts there. And so I was doing those, and yeah, I did all right. And I started getting paid for some smaller gigs by the end of that year. This would have been 2012, a long time ago now. So I was already starting to get a bit of money from that. So it was all going pretty well, even when I was 18, 19. I took a gap year and I traveled to all the cities that I would hope I would come back to one day. So this is a bit cute, but went to LA, I went to New York, Montreal, they got a big comedy festival there, Edinburgh in Scotland, London, and then Mumbai. And I thought, yeah, one day I'll be back here and perform comedy. So I haven't really done it in those cities yet, but I've performed in Perth. So, you know, not quite New York,
right?
But yeah.
Still cute.
Yeah, exactly. And then, yeah, like I said, I was a sort of an early adopter of YouTube and making content, and that really took off. And yeah, within a year, I was able to do it full time. So
yeah, wow.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. So like, you know, YouTube comedy was very new at the time, and there wasn't a lot of people in that space. Who are your influences, or what influenced your content at the time? So it was such a new space.
Well, it's funny you guys said Superwog at the start, because even when I was in high school, he started going viral and he influenced me a lot.
Wow.
For talking about YouTube comedians. To this day, still a huge fan of Superwog.
That's crazy, because I kind of put you in the same bubble as like Superwog, Mike Johnny. It's Neel as well, community channel. You know.
That's crazy, because like they all, I think they were maybe 3 or 4 years before me. And so I would have been in year 11 watching them. Mm-hmm. So all of those guys, they were inspiring. A lot of the other stand-up comedians that I looked up to, people like Chris Rock, who since had a resurgence because of being slapped show.
Amazing show.
An interesting way to get his name back into the headlines, but hey, I'm a big fan of him, so I'm all for it. Of course, Russell Peters. Love Russell Peters. And the people I said before, Chris Lilly was a huge inspiration.
Summer Heights Live.
Yes, Summer Heights High, even Angry Boys and Johnny from Tonga, all those ones were really funny. But I think Sacha Baron Cohen would I think he's a genius. I think what he did with Borat and then Bruno and
Ali G.
Yeah, Ali G. I love that kind of character comedy where people aren't even aware that someone's acting. I think that's brilliant.
His commitment to the characters is next level.
Oh,
does not break it the entire time. It's
so many of the stories where a lot of the scenes in Borat and Bruno, that's just actually him, and the people are genuinely reacting that way, which is insane. Yeah.
So from YouTube and going to shows, obviously like you kind of created skits, and that was like one thing. Was it a bit different adapting your material to be able to do full sets?
Well, I was doing a lot of stand-up as well, so I was doing the open mic night, is it? So,
do you remember your first open mic night?
Yeah, actually I do. So, okay, there was the first time I did stand-up, and then my first open mic night. So the first time I did stand-up was competition for high school students called Class Clowns. And that one went really well, actually. But then my first open mic night, it was at a comedy club that's now closed down called the Laugh Garage, which was just near Hyde Park. And it was daunting because I'd just turned 18. So my parents had always said, no, you can't go and do these shows until you're 18, because there'd be some people who were under 18 and then their dad would come with them sitting there doing jokes about their dad, which is just hilarious. So then I turned 18, I went to that open mic night and it went all right. I actually got some good laughs, and I unfortunately don't have like a horror story where no one laughed, but there were definitely a few nights where you met with silence, and it's awkward, but that's where you really find out the people who truly want it, I think.
Do you feel like your audience you were able to leverage from your YouTube/social media platforms, or was it something that was organic, or I guess both?
Probably more so at the start, more so from social media. And I think nowadays everyone who's gaining traction with a live audience, it's generally from social media. I think the traditional pathways of television, radio, etc., they still obviously exist, but they don't have the sway or influence that they used to. So I would say it was more so from social media.
I guess that's pretty handy though, right? Like you were able to tap into it early on. And again, you're part of that new wave, I guess, of people transitioning from traditional media to this new media that people might have been a bit more riled up about. I am curious, I know it's later on in the questions, but I do want to ask, like, what was that climate or the environment like at the time when there were traditional comedians, quote unquote, versus this new wave who were on YouTube and on social media, and this young crowd moving through? Was there a bit of backlash? Was there a bit of tension?
Yeah, I felt quite a lot actually. It was new for all the people who had just been doing the traditional route for sometimes 10, 15, 20 years, and then to see these often younger comedians coming through and building an audience, it caused a bit of resentment. But it also, what it did do is it took away the need to actually be to reach a certain level of competence at live comedy, because prior to that, obviously there was a ladder that you have to climb, and to climb that you have to show a certain level of skill at live comedy. Whereas now it was, okay, you can gain an online audience, and whether that translates to good live comedy or not is irrelevant. You've got an audience here, and you can just perform your live show to them. So I think that's where a lot of that tension came from. But at the same time, there was some pretty incredible acts coming up from the internet that I think weren't really getting the credit. I'm not talking about myself here. I think Superwalk is actually a prime example. Like, for a long time, a lot of people didn't even know who he was. Like, I'd talk to other comedians, hey, Superwalk, or French, they wouldn't even know them. So there were these two worlds that were just distant. And even to this day, a lot of people in TV and in radio, they're sort of aware of what's going on online, but they still don't classify it as legitimate, or they'll say that it's not true comedy. They'll have some narrative to dismiss us, but you can't really ignore it now. I mean, now, if anything, I think I'm back the right horse. I think the internet grew to now be bigger than traditional media, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, at the time it was just so exciting to see stories and like comedy and content that was so relatable for us. Like, especially, like, I grew up in the inner west, so it was like a very diverse community as well. And like seeing your characters, and it's the exact same type of environment that I grew up in. Like, my friends try to do accents and stuff as well. I think having just it's content that was tailored to our experiences just made a huge difference.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. Thank you. Yeah, I think I was thinking about this the other day. I think there were a lot of maybe well-meaning people who were very reticent to laugh at racial humor because they mightn't have grown up around different ethnicities. And then to them, a really simplistic and, let's be honest, dumb race joke, they can't really differentiate that from someone making a really nuanced depiction of a different ethnicity, where that ethnicity even thinks it's funny. So then they would just say, oh, no, all of that's racist. So I hope that, eventually there's the mainstream, or, people who might have had the same experience we did can ascertain what actually is good racial comedy versus what is something that they maybe should be looking down upon. Yeah. But yeah, those nuances for like Gen Y and Gen Z who grew up in Western Sydney or certain areas of Australia, that you didn't really see that anywhere. And I thought Superwalk would be like the first big Aussie comedian to truly depict that in a very hilarious way. And hopefully I was able to do it at a decent level as well.
100%. Obviously, PC culture / cancel culture is a huge thing right now.
Yeah.
And like, it is very important to talk about because, you have to go one end of the spectrum to come back to the middle, or like some kind of middle ground. And obviously before as well, I do feel like a few years ago, there were no filters or no boundaries. But I guess we would love to hear your take on what comedy is like now, considering there's so much PC / cancel culture involved, and have you had to re-navigate yourself?
Yeah, so there's, I think we're already in a stage where there's now a backlash to that. And now there are a few comedians who are almost taking on a reactionary stance and doing jokes that they wouldn't have done 5 or 6 years ago, and are doing it just on principle, even if they don't necessarily think that there's jokes. I think Dave Chappelle's actually a good example of that, because in my humble opinion, he's a much better comedian than I am. But I think his earlier work was actually more nuanced and more interesting and funnier. And now it seems like he's just being offensive for the sake of it. But at the same time, I can understand the sentiment. I think you've got an imperfect situation either way. So you've either got a situation where we're so protective of not being offensive to other groups that you just, anything that even could be remotely offensive, you say, no, we're not going to give that a platform. We're going to sort of socially shame those people. Or you say, all right, we have to just kind of allow the space for people to potentially be offensive. And sometimes some jokes and some comedians will go in there that maybe aren't, they're not the smartest or they're not particularly highbrow. Doesn't necessarily mean they're bad, but they could be offensive to a certain section of the population. And I think in both situations, they're imperfect. You got positives and negatives. You got the positive of that first option is that no one gets their feelings hurt, I suppose. But the negative is you don't really get to explore certain topics. You don't really get to do comedy that I think is the best, which is the one that toes the line and finds that nuance and can really just get to the details and the specifics of certain cultural or ethnic groups. Or you have the other option where you kind of just say, all right, it's a free-for-all. Everyone just do what they want. And then, you're going to have to deal with some comedy that is offensive. But I think in both those situations, option B is better. I mean, I'm biased, obviously, because I'm a comedian and I'm kind of doing that. But, and then in terms of like the broader comedy landscape right now, yeah, I mean, it really depends who you talk to. From what I've heard, television and radio in the mainstream is very politically correct, and they've got advertisers involved and they might have a reason for that. And you have comedians mainly online now that are now breaking away from that. And it's not like they have no filter, but they certainly have less of a filter. And then a lot of comedy, America, you could say is like the mecca of comedy in America, just generally is so politicized and polarized regardless of comedy, but that's seeped into art and comedy now as well. They have, the left-wing comedians and the right-wing comedians, and there's just all these little tribal groups, and, it's, there aren't sort of major institutions that you can point to and say, that's where the good comedians are coming from. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of opportunity because it's almost like the Wild West where new institutions can be built and new comedians and more comedians who aren't averse to taking risks and experimentation can make a name for themselves. So I like where it is right now. Yeah,
it's good. I guess like you also have to read the room sometimes too, and depends on what the climate is like. Sorry, I know you've got a question, but just quickly as well. Have you felt like you've had to readjust or recreate your material to suit the current climate? Because I know that your comedy before was very suited to what was relevant then. And the way that you've shifted it, in my opinion, feels like it's way more nuanced and complex, but in a way of like, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that also is just, I was 19 when I started, so I think a lot of that was to the start.
Your jokes have matured with.
I think, I think I've matured rather. I haven't been trying to change the comedy for the climate. Unless I've been doing it subconsciously. If anything, I know I have that impulse sometimes to think, there's all this stuff on social media. I'm just going to, this is a borderline joke. You know what? I'm just going to say it because, I just want to stick it to them. But sometimes I try, sometimes I give into that. Sometimes I refrain from that. I always try to put out kind of nuanced and complex and precise comedy because I think I truly believe you can make fun of or make jokes about any culture, any group of people or anything, assuming it's funny. If it's funny, and if that, I always try to test it like this, if that group likes the jokes or the majority of that group likes the humor, then I've done my job.
It's got to be accurate as well.
Exactly.
It's not the umbrella, it's the layers involved.
Exactly. So if I'm doing jokes, if I'm doing brown jokes, my goal is to ensure that at least 80 to 90% of brown people watching those jokes are going to find it funny. If I'm doing Asian jokes, same thing. If I'm doing jokes about women or anything like that, you want to make sure that the majority of that group finds it funny. That's all I'm aiming to do. But I'm not trying to change it for the climate or anything because I don't have any brands or I'm not on TV, so I have a lot more freedom. Less money, but freedom, which I think is better.
Do you feel like having an ethnic background gave you that advantage to be able to make these racial jokes and criticisms much easier than, say, Caucasian comedian would be able to?
I think it did. Yeah, I actually think it did. I think people, especially if it's like a group that's not my group. So I think everyone's pretty relaxed. I'm doing brown jokes. But if I go and say I'm doing Asian jokes, or if I'm doing black jokes or something, then people are like, all right, let's see, where's he going with this? And, I don't know. And I'll be honest, I don't always get it as accurately as I strive to get it. But I would just hope that people understand you need to allow comedians that license. I'm not saying you can't criticize comedians or any artist for that matter. But, there's a difference between saying, hey, I don't think that was your best joke, compared to, oh, you're an irredeemably racist person that I'll unfollow now forever. But yeah, I think I had an advantage. I think if you're a white person, a particular white guy getting on stage doing an Asian joke, everyone tenses up and is like, all right, this better be funny. And then there are some comedians who can do it really well. I think Andrew Schultz in America is and because I think he obviously grew up around a lot of different ethnicities. So when he does brown jokes, for example, he just knows these things where I'm just shocked. How do you know that? And that's why he's people will go and listen to him and watch him. So yeah, I do think there's a slight advantage there.
Yeah, like, I think even in the skit comedy scene, for example, you have guys like Key and Peter who are biracial.
Yeah.
So they can get away with doing not just white jokes, but black jokes, and also Latino jokes even, and play those characters. And obviously they do it with the nuance and care and dedication and capturing it in a way that is going to be funny to those groups, and they do it well. But obviously people like Chris Lilly, have a bit more backlash when he's doing blackface, for example, in Angry Boys. And so there's that kind of double-edged sword, that kind of bias there, which is interesting. Yeah,
it is. And I think when you're doing any content related to a group that you're not a part of, there's that extra pressure to make sure it's really funny. And I absolutely love Chris Lilly. I think the S-Mouse character wasn't his most accurate character, and I think that's also contributed to the black backlash. Oh my god! What do you slip? I think Key and Peele, when they do their Latino characters, it's so funny. So you can't get out of it. Yeah, I mean, you got to laugh.
So good.
Exactly.
That was the Latino crowd were asking for. They were like, do us next time. Do us with that.
It was the thing too, right? Yeah, I think there's a difference between, say, if someone was doing brown jokes and they're just doing taxi jokes or whatever, compared to when the best, white comedian I've seen do brown jokes is Andrew Schultz, because you're just shocked. How do you even know that? Mm-hmm. And I think finding that difference. But I also will say, I think you just do have to say, all right, you just got to let everyone kind of go for it, and then allow them the space to do that. And some are going to do it well, some are going to not do it well. And I think that's just better for comedy and for society in general.
Taking a slightly different spin as well. I know in our prep call you were mentioning, turning this into a business, and also the way that you kind of got started was, I think it was in your high school theatre class or room that you were able to bring in students and teach them. Was it acting and stand-up and everything? Oh, improv.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
So I guess the question is how did you learn to turn this into a sustainable business for yourself and doing it full time?
You had to learn on the fly because the medium was so new. There was no given way of doing it. There was no tried and tested pathway. So yeah, you do have to have both a creative mind and a business mind, and sometimes they're in conflict with each other. But I might just because I'm Indian, but I always had a bit of a business mind. And after high school, I started teaching some of the high school kids improv, and I was really passionate about that. And they're all 23 now, which is weird. And I expanded that to a few other schools, and I don't like to see myself as a brand, but I guess I am. Mm-hmm. And I have to be able to market that brand and figure out cash flow and figure out what are the sources of income, can I diversify that, while still maintain the ultimate goal is still to be as creative as I possibly can. And I'm willing to take a pay cut for that. I don't do a lot of mainstream and brand stuff, particularly if they say, oh, you can't say this, you can't say that. But yeah, it is a business, and you know, it's changed so much in the last 10 years, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years. Everyone's a content creator now, and so competing with, you know, it was before you were just competing with comedians. Now you're competing with like the Coles content creation team. So
They got good content.
they do, yeah. These companies now, the food company is funnier than you. That's it kind of hits the self-esteem a little bit.
This episode is produced and brought to you by Social Wave. Social Wave is a strategic content marketing agency helping businesses grow revenue using video, podcasts, and SEO. Head on over to socialwave.com.au to find out more. Now back to the show.
I guess in terms of like a bit of guidance, maybe you can give guidance for those listening, but it's one thing to take it from high school or teaching kids to turning into a full-time blown thing that you're like after 10 years and still sustaining. Can you walk us through like what your mindset was? And obviously you would have, when we spoke about it, you said you learned a lot of things on the fly and that's just what you had to do. But was there maybe someone you could lean on? Were there people in the industry you could lean on? And again, the other conversation is being in the arts industry, it's not sustainable income per se, right?
Yeah.
And that's hard to wait. Like Noel, you know what it's like.
Yeah.
It's like you're just waiting for the next paycheck and then happy to sustain yourself and then what's the next gig, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess in a nutshell, it's a very big question or a long-winded question, but how do you navigate that and what guidance could you give?
Yeah, it's tricky. It's difficult because I really like consistency and I like having a plan and I like thinking, all right, in 5 years, if I'm making X amount of money and I can save Y and this is what I get to, but you just can't do that in the arts. So you have to be extra abstemious almost. You got to really save well and just be small C conservative financially. But I think now with the way the arts industry is going, the more skills you have, the better you're going to be. So if you just want to be a comedian, okay, learn video editing, learn how to use a camera, learn behind the camera skills, and that will serve you really well because a lot of people will want to collaborate and you can make extra bit of money here and there. Even administration or even just some things like doing door. Like when I started, I was scanning tickets to let people into comedy shows. And, you know, that was just a nice little way to gain a little bit of extra income on the side. So anything you can do that is consistent, that is contributing, it might not be directly artistic, but is sort of contributing. So if you want to be a theatre actor and you know, you're working at a theatre or you're working at the bar at a comedy club, something like that, I would recommend. And just baby steps. Try to just do it 1 or 2 days a week. Try to, you know, generate, maybe a little goal is generate $10,000 a year from this. Maybe in 5 years I can, or well, 3 or 4 or even 5 years, let's aim to generate $10,000 a year from this. So it's a pretty reasonable goal. And then once you've done that, all right, let's try to generate 20,000. And then always evolving and changing. And I think if you can maintain an audience that will stick with you for a long time, that's really helpful. There are some acts that get huge buzz for a short amount of time. And then there are some that have a smaller audience in terms of total size, but they're a very loyal audience. And then that will serve you well a long time. So I think there's a good analogy someone told me, just like you can either have 10,000 people that like you that might come to your show. You can have 1,000 people that are willing to spend $100 on your shows or your products every year, and then that's your salary. So
like true fans.
Yeah.
So as a content creator though, as well as a comedian, I know there's always this constant pressure to constantly make content, especially at the pace at which people consume content now through socials. Like, do you ever feel like there are moments where you're burning out and you have to take breaks regularly, for example, or do you have to just keep beating the machine and try to find new ways to be creative?
Yeah, to be honest, it's exhausting, dude. Like all the new platforms that are constantly coming out. So first when TikTok started generating a lot of buzz, I thought, oh, another one, jeez. Then I got on there, it was doing really well. Now I have the most followers on TikTok.
Oh, wow.
Anyway. And then when was it, last year? Hey, Spotify's doing video now. I'm like, I couldn't be fucking bothered, man. Like, I mean, that's where I think maybe my artistic side takes over the business side, because the business person will be like, yeah, keep hustling. Post more content, like Gary Vee. You know, whatever the hell he does. And I'm like, dude, I can't be bothered, man. Like, I'm done. Like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. That's it.
That's a lot of platforms, isn't it?
Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah.
And now X or whatever the hell Elon's doing.
And then you've got your shows as well that are coming up with new content for that.
Exactly. So yeah, some people can scale it well. Very on people who edit. It's a lot harder when you're doing sketches because you know there's the quality and quantity are in an inverse relationship where if you're trying to churn out 3 sketches a week, the quality will go down. Whereas people who do react videos or pranks or commentary, I'm in a way sometimes a bit jealous of them because if you're just commentating and reacting to a video, you can pump out hundreds of those a week. I wish I could do that, but no, I got to do sketches and jokes that take a long time to write. So, yeah, just knowing what works for you and how you can best adapt to platforms and new algorithms without burning yourself out. It's like, I almost see it as, it's like what the weather would have been for like our farming ancestors, like the algorithm.
Okay, that's a good way to put it, actually.
They would have been like, oh, please, I hope Dutch rains are good this year. That'll determine whether I can feed my family. It's like, oh, I hope the TikTok algorithm is good this year. I'm going to pray to the TikTok god. It's getting to that point. So yeah, it's exhausting, but I still wouldn't trade this. I still absolutely love what I do. And when you weigh out the positives and negatives, the positives definitely outweigh the negatives. So it's still great.
I'm curious as well, going off the back of Noel's question, like, would you say you're more of an introvert or more of an extrovert? Because being on stage, you'd have to be a bit more of an extrovert. But personally, like Neel yourself, like what are you or what do you kind of identify as? And then how do you balance both if they are different?
Yeah, probably more introverted than I am extroverted, but I got a bit of both in me.
So it's not too
non-binary in between introvert and extrovert.
Do you feel like you are very different from your stage persona though? Because you're known as the guy that does those amazing impressions and you're a certain type of comedy, but you in real life, like how close are you to your actual stage persona?
Yeah, I'm not as energetic and it's when you're on stage, you're doing a job, right? You're trying to make people laugh. You've got specific jokes, and there's a dynamic there when you're on stage, and there's a room of people that are attentive to what you say. It's very different to a social situation, and the most frustrating thing comedians ever hear is like, "You're a comedian. Oh, tell us a joke, mate." And then dance with you. I'll tell you what I say on stage, and it won't make you laugh. And then you'll go and tell your friends, oh, I met that Neel guy. He was shit. So, you don't do that for any other job. Oh, you're a plumber? Okay, hey, here's a pipe, bro. You want to fix it? So
you work at Subway, make me say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, my offstage persona is it's different. It's just, I'd say more normal.
So it's like, I like winding back though, I know you also kind of got into film. You also make short films and write your own content as well. And you also pursued acting, or at least try to break into the acting scene at one stage. Like, what was your experience like there?
I didn't like it, to be honest. I didn't like the industry because you're so dependent upon external factors. So you're hoping that you have a good agent and that you have a casting director that just that's our guy. There's always that cliche of like, we need to find our next main character here. I saw him at the supermarket. And then, I didn't like that. I wanted to be in control of what I put out there. And I thought stand-up comedy was a much better avenue for that. I love the craft of acting and filmmaking, and I want to keep doing it. I just haven't had a good idea for a short film for a while. A lot of people have asked me, yeah, you should make another short film. I'm like, all right, well, I don't want to churn them out. So yeah, my experience there was I loved the craft of filmmaking and acting, but I just didn't like being beholden to all the external factors in the film industry, and there's far fewer of those involved in comedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've worked in the film and television industry here for a while as well. There's obviously issues around seeing people of color on screen, especially in like network produced shows. That's not as common. Did you find that there were kind of issues around like typecasting when you were in the acting scene? Yeah,
there's all of that. Because in comedy it can always be an advantage. But when I started with 2008-9, where I was still 15 and then had an acting agent and things, and the only roles you get, which is here's like the ethnic hoodlum that obviously must be like poor and disenfranchised, because all brown people are poor and disenfranchised and refugees, and they don't just live normal lives. But so I got a bit sick of that, and yeah, I didn't like all that, because even today it's still a lot of, I feel like it's a lot of that. Like there's more people, like I don't even like that term, but there's more people on the shows, but then they're always in some kind of like, oh, feel sorry for me type role. And I don't know, I know that's some people like that, but man, I get the feeling it's like old white people watching it and then patting themselves on the back, being like,
We took that obviously quote here.
Wes done well.
So true. That
Could have done so well. For them. It's patronizing.
yeah.
That's a conflict.
Brilliant. When you were making those early short films, obviously it takes like a whole village to make films, like good quality films at least. How did you get the resourcing and like people in the team to be able to crew up and do it?
I think I was lucky that I was making them when I was 21, 22, because then I just talked to a lot of film students. No, I did take, but I didn't do the normal, the Screen Australia award. Just probably illegal, but a lot of people were just happy to be a part of it and happy to get 50 to 100 for the day, because they were 19, 20-year-old film students. So that was very helpful. And then as I progressed, I'd just invest my own money into them, because as you know, that film, unless you're making a big Hollywood blockbuster, you're losing money. And you do have to see this as a business, and it's not like I just have cash to burn. So if it's a film that I want to put a couple of grand into, I'll need to make sure it's really good, and just through people I knew and get the right people involved. And it's quite an ordeal making a film compared to making a comedy sketch. A film that will take, to do it well, often takes weeks, if not months.
Yeah, and a healthy budget does help as well. And,
Totally.
Lots of planning and talent, getting talented crew who actually believe in your content and the message.
Absolutely.
That's crucial. I know you're also working on a few other projects as well, and you've got a couple of podcasts.
Yeah.
One of them including Sexcells.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about what you're working on at the moment.
Yeah, so I started podcasting in 2019 with Jordan, Friendly Geordies, and since that one is on indefinite leave, but there's 150 episodes there, and then that one is it was a lot of fun, but it's crazy because we go on some pretty wild tangents. And look, there's elements of that. It was like two dudes with a microphone, but we did that before it became a meme. And then I think when I bought all the equipment for podcasting, and then the lockdown happened, and I'm like, well, I got all this equipment, can't do live comedy, I can't do sketches. I wanted to, because that was when all the dating podcasts were starting out, and I just felt like, all right, it's either two women talking about dating men, or it's two dudes talking about dating women. And I thought, well, I want to who bridge the gap here and try to see it from both perspectives. And I didn't want it to be a comedy podcast. So I met Eliza, who is a sexologist and a relationship therapist, and we got along really well. And so we started doing that podcast, which was all about dating and culture today, seeing it from a male and female perspective. And then within the 3 years, I mean, look at all the podcasts that have popped up on that same theme. You just scroll through TikTok now, it's all it is, well, this is what, red flag here, or it's, the red pill stuff of like, oh, bro, fucking
entertain.
Yeah, you're allowed to have 5 side chicks, and if she has one dude, fucking dump her or whatever.
Don't be too emotional.
Yeah, all that stuff. And then there's like Call Her Daddy, which is, this is why if a man sits with his leg over his knee, it's a red flag. And it just felt like both sides are just preaching to the choir. But I guess a lot of people want that. This is definitely like the dating podcast era, and we strive to be a bit more nuanced and come at it from. If we disagree with each other, we try to make it respectful, and we definitely do disagree with each other. And
it's critical thinking.
It is, yeah. And we try to see things from each other's perspective, and yeah, I think that has been really, even regardless of whether it's just part of my career or content, I think that one has just been a nice, it's going to sound cringy, but it's just been a nice journey. Because, yeah, we've explored a lot of topics that are actually just growing in relevance, and it's been good to sort of hash those ideas out with someone who might be from the other, I was going to say the other side, but that's crazy to talk about.
Yeah, it does make sense though, because I remember years ago when I watched one of your stand-up, that still kind of sticks with me. One of the bits you did was like, if brown men were sexualized as much as white women, they would balance out. And I feel like your podcast just encapsulates that, because you got a brown dude, alphabet, and it's just different perspective. It's perfect. It's like,
Yeah, we'll take some of that sexualization, right? You're getting too many DMs. Give some to us.
yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges, biggest learnings that you've learned from that podcast, or things that might have been like, oh shit, I didn't even think about it like that?
Just how different people think, not necessarily just because if you look at the final product of their thoughts, their end opinion on a certain topic, and you can often internalize a confusion, obsessing about they get to, and how can they possibly have come to that conclusion when they've seen the same facts I have? Mm-hmm. But people just think differently, and on average, I think men and women do think differently. I don't know if it's controversial in this day and age to say that, but from all the books I've read on that, and then from the now 140 podcasts I've done with Eliza, I think we can see reality and come to different conclusions from that reality. It doesn't mean it's fake news or a false narrative. I just think people interpret events and ideas differently. Mm-hmm. And it's important to sort of think through the process of how someone could come to that. I read a really good book about how there are people who are systemizers and people who are empathizers. So empathizers will generally see things through the lens of empathy and often try to connect with people and sort of see the personal journey that comes from a certain idea or a viewpoint, whereas systemizers will always try to analyze the abstract rules involved in any given situation or topic. And then I think when I've taken that lens and sort of thought, I don't understand that person's opinion. Oh, wait, they're probably more of an empathizer. Or I don't understand that person's opinion. Oh, they're like a hyper systemizer. That's helped me a lot. And I'd say that would be the biggest takeaway, just how different people can have different ways of thinking. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't always relate. It's not like an equal sex difference there, but, certain groups can think differently to other groups and value different things and see the world differently. And I think that's where a lot of the social media conflict is coming from.
What can people kind of expect coming up from you, or do you have any new projects that you're working on?
I've been managing a live comedy show. So that started in 2019 because I just wanted to try material at a night where I wasn't used as promotion to sell the show. Which I know that sounds weird, but that's what happens when you have an internet following. Sometimes the club, there's a disconnect between the club scene and the internet scene still. And so they think, oh yeah, it's just an internet ad, we'll put them on the promo. And then half your fans come, and then that's where you want to try material. That's where you want to, and then there's 9 other acts and you don't know how good they are. So I started Room, and that went really well. And a lot of those clips, those sort of panel show style clips that I thought would be a good way to just market the show and a good sort of test of skill for the comedians and a way to flex their comedy writing muscle. Those clips went super viral on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and we've since expanded to have that show happen in Melbourne. And last night it's officially started in Brisbane.
Oh, cool.
So Comedy Untamed, if you want to see a good comedy show, I've been working on that a lot. So it's more of the, business mind that I've been able to put to use. And I'm usually at the Sydney shows, but if I'm not there, it'll still be a good show. Obviously, Melbourne happens every week, Brisbane happens every week, and then we do monthly in Newcastle as well. And maybe one day we'll do Perth. So I've been working on that a lot.
And then LA.
Yeah, that's the rest.
Yeah, imagine that. Yeah. For those, Perth is the priority. And then LA and New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those listeners as well, like, I guess to wrap things up, what words of advice would you be able to give those who might be exploring something similar to you or want to get into the arts industry as well?
There's enough of us in here. Don't do it. No.
Do engineering. Yeah.
Always watch as much content. I sort of don't like that word content, but watch as much as you can from people who are growing in that industry right now, who are doing good things, putting out good content. Always be consuming as much of that as you possibly can. And go to events, network. There's not really huge networking events and things like that for comedy, but if you just go to a comedy night, if we're talking specifically about comedy, and just get to know people, that'll help you a lot. Yeah, other than that, I suppose just put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, and it's a long haul. It's often people will get discouraged after 3 months of not getting any traction online, and it's the people who stick with it for years that eventually something clicks. Or eventually, it's a skill that you learn year by year. You get a bit better, and you understand what is good for the algorithm, what's good for your fan base. And I was making sketches from 2007, and then I didn't really go viral till 2013. So when people don't know that, they think, oh, you just went viral overnight. Well, it was actually 6 years. So just don't be in it for going viral or being famous. Only do it if you genuinely love what you do, because then it won't matter as much if you're, raking in the big bucks and bringing in huge amounts of views. You just be doing it because you want to perfect the craft and you love what you do. And those are the people that ultimately sustain a career long term, I think.
Probably a little bit off topic, but yeah, back to, Jordan Shanks. And, he's been doing a lot.
Yeah.
And the firebombing, and even just in the comedy scene in general with Chappelle getting tackled and Chris Rock slapped, the physical danger for comedians who are speaking out is a huge deal in the industry right now. Does that kind of I just want to get your thoughts on that and how that kind of affects not just you, but maybe the comedy community in general right now in terms of what you actually speak up about.
Yeah, there's always that little lingering thought at the back of your mind. What if I say something that someone in the audience takes literally, violent objection to? But compared to other professions, it's still relatively physically safe. And it's a small, I'd say right now, it's still a pretty infinitesimal risk. Unless you are doing something like what Jordan is, which is uncovering legitimate corruption in this country. So
calling out very powerful people.
Yeah. So for him, that is a risk that he unfortunately has taken, and it is very sadly manifested in a seriously violent and scary incident. So I wish we didn't live in a world where people who are, uncovering truths about powerful people are not having their house firebombed, but that is the world we live in. And I really do admire his tenacity and his commitment to still go after after that. That's fascinating and extremely admirable. The Dave Chappelle one was strange. He got tackled or something, didn't he?
Yeah, he got tackled on stage. This is probably about a year ago, I think. But yeah.
You gotta hope the security's there. Waiting so very long.
Yeah.
I do think, compared to, I think those incidents have blown up, and it makes us feel like, okay, a lot of comedians are unsafe or physically threatened, and I think those are isolated incidents of people who are very prominent. And I'm saying controversially by other means, I'm not, a victim blaming them for anything, but for the most part, I don't really, I don't really feel too scared on stage. I guess it depends on the audience. I performed at the Campbelltown RSL, and there were a lot of dudes with face tats, and I actually loved it. So I did all right, but yeah, there's been very rare instances. A few guys have got really angry and just walked out.
Wow.
And then you get a few weird messages from people saying, "Oh, I oversee you, I'll bash you," and then nothing ever has happened, though. So yeah, exactly. But I'm from Cogger, bro, so try.
Or don't.
This would be such a middle class up.
I guess to wrap as well, where can people find you or how do people connect with you?
Sure, just still my socials. So I'm probably the most active on Instagram, isn't it? It's not that many followers. So Instagram is just my full name, Neel Kolhatkar, NeelKolhatkar. Facebook, same name. It's all just my name. YouTube and TikTok, and those are the main ones that I don't post anywhere else. And then Sexcells podcast is the podcast we were talking about earlier. And then my website, but there's not much on there, just an email. So
And YouTube. Your YouTube channels.
yeah, YouTube channel. And then there's also the Comedy Untamed YouTube channel, socials, all of that. And yeah,
That makes sense. Look, I'll pop those in the show notes as well. But thank you so much for coming all the way to Parrot and
Yeah,
the podcast with us.
thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Level Asian podcast. Make sure you subscribe and leave us a 5-star review if you enjoyed the episode. And why not share it with friends and family who might enjoy it too? Also, make sure you head over to levelasianpodcast.com to join our email list and to receive the latest updates and get notified when the next episode drops. If you know a great guest we should feature, email us at contact@levelasianpodcast.com or DM us on our socials in the show notes. Catch you on the next episode.